Radio. 500,000 new unemployment claims plus. We had 3 banks seized last Friday, right? The special Friday Owl of Minerva raids by Sheila Bair and the FDIC. That was Georgia, California, Illinois, and Florida. And we've got 123 banks shut down so far this year. Those states I just gave were the ones where you had the most bank failures. And a lot of quackademic economists say that, well, you know, the dollar is cheapening. That means there'll be exports. Yeah, too bad there are no export industries left. Too bad the U.S. has been so completely deindustrialized. You can't pull export industries out of your nose just because the dollar goes down. A lot of these things were destroyed during the reign of Paul Adolph Volcker, who's now sitting in the White House as a gray eminence. The news is the most recent U.S. merchandise trade deficit. This is the one that really hurts. The federal budget deficit is more manageable than this one. This is the dollar overhang in the world. We've had a $36.5 billion monthly deficit. And the thing about it is that is up almost 20% from the previous month's trade deficit. So what they say is that the balance of trade deficit is getting bigger, even though the weak dollar is somewhat aiding exports, but not enough. The U.S. export level is 20% below where it was when the crisis started back in September. So the weak dollar not having much of an effect. Now, we've got, again, Bernanke and Geithner and Summers under attack. Most interesting, of course, the House Financial Services Committee voted 43-26 to approve the Ron Paul amendment to audit the Fed. And, of course, Bernanke is freaking out on this. This is a highly constructive measure. Accountability. We want to know where that money went. We want to know what foreign banks, foreign hedge funds, foreign hyenas have gotten U.S. taxpayer money in the process. And, of course, we have the Wall Street Journal reporting this. The more interesting one is the Washington Post. Washington Post, of course, the House organ of the Federal Reserve. That's who runs it, right? We're told that the most troubling for the administration was this measure by Ron Paul that would subject the Federal Reserve to unprecedented scrutiny, which passed the House Financial Services Committee. And they have 300 members of the House of Representatives have signed on to this Ron Paul amendment. Oversight, accountability, and naturally Bernanke says, no, not us. And the worry from the Wall Street Journal and indeed the Washington Post is that these wonderful policymakers have to be independent. Independent of what? Independent of the voters? Independent of the Constitution? Independent of the national interest? What do they represent? How are they independent? They're not independent. They speak for the Wall Street money center banks, and everybody knows it. They are the zombie bankers, the hedge fund hyenas, and the financial jackals of every stripe. And this is finally now seeping in. So we can call it Paul Sanders because Bernie Sanders of Vermont is sponsoring a parallel measure. It will be harder to get it through the Senate, of course, for the usual structural reasons, but Bernie Sanders already has about a third of the Senate that have come on board. And then we have the revelations about Tiny Tim Geithner, the tax cheat, and AIG. More stuff is coming out about how Tiny Tim Geithner, when he was the head of the New York Federal Reserve, the flagship branch of the entire system last September, that infamous meeting over that weekend of Lehman Brothers in his office, and then what he did in that following week, transferring what is now $180 billion plus to AIG, with tranches of that in the $10 to $12 billion range going to Deutsche Bank, Barclays Bank, Societe Generale, other foreign banking institutions, as well as a good hefty $15 billion or so to Goldman Sachs. What was that all about? That's exactly what an audit might reveal. We want to audit the New York branch, not just the Federal Board of Governors in Washington, D.C. That's not the real center of power. We want to audit the New York Fed. That is the one. There are secrets in there going back to World War I and even beyond. And then when Geithner appeared to try to sell his bankrupt policies, we had two Republicans performing a useful public service. That would be Congressman Brady and Congressman Burgess, Republicans, saying that he should resign. And yes, he should resign. He should resign and be indicted. He should be impeached and indicted because this is a monstrous thing. We've also got Congressman DeFazio of Oregon calling for the ouster, the firing of Geithner and Summers. Don't forget Summers. He's the one who makes the policies that come out of Geithner's, Tiny Tim's little mouth. So you've also got Dodd. Dodd, in order to try to hang on to his Senate seat, is striking the pose of somebody who wants to strip away the regulatory dimensions of the Fed, because it's an easy argument. The Fed has failed utterly as a regulator. They have struck out again and again. They have failed and failed and failed. Remember, Greenspan was the guy who brought you the derivatives plague. Greenspan was the number one advocate of wild derivatives markets, right? Completely deregulated, not even reportable. Remember his fight with Brooksley Born. So this is an absolute monstrosity. So Geithner should indeed go. And what you're seeing now is also a general rage against the Obama administration. As a matter of fact, that's how the Washington Post tries to play it. They say angry Congress lashes out at Obama. Well, it's really more directly the Fed and Geithner. But, of course, Obama is the patron of both. Obama is Mr. Bailout. We've got the Black Caucus saying, and it's quite useful and quite true, that the black community has not been served by any of these financial regulations. They need protection. I'll tell you some protection. How about slapping a 10% maximum on payday loans from predatory lenders? How about slapping a 10% federal ceiling, a usury law at the federal level, so you can have a credit card, but the interest rate on it can't go above 10% when you factor in all the fees that they're hitting you with. You probably noticed the Fed is so scared that they came out last week with some very weak limits on these fees, overdraft fees and related fees that banks are charging. This was simply the Fed scurrying to cover their rear end in the face of this tremendous anger that's going on. So on to audit, but above all, seize the Fed, run it as a Bureau of the Treasury. We'll be back in a minute.